I'm reading a story called Floating Kibble Everywhere. NASA wanted to hire me once. Really? Sure. I don't remember that. She doesn't remember this because I am essentially lying. I don't know where the lie came from. I've never wanted to work for NASA, but now that she's put down her menu, it's too late to step down, so I keep going. It was a while ago, I say. And I didn't really want to talk about it then. I was a conscientious objector to space programs and their practices. She's looking at her menu again. Though if I joined, I could have maybe done something about those dogs. She looks up and I pretend to be busy looking out the window. Oh, right, yeah, as I was saying, I'd have done something about those poor dogs they sent into space. I'm no hero, I just think that they deserve a decent memorial, those dogs. A folded flag, at least. And the monkeys, too, but more the dogs for some reason. The Russians did it more than we did, which is probably why they won the space race, because of their dog misuse. I couldn't stand the thought of it, those dogs sent into space, never knowing if they'd see the Earth again, if they'd get to run through a field or eat another dog's dog turd. I bet they didn't even know they were in space. What is outer space, after all, to a dog? Now, if a person went up with the dog, now that would be different. Dogs need people. I bet a dog would have loved to ride with his master. I bet he'd start panting and barking and knocking his plastic bubble helmet against the spaceship window. And the person, at least, could throw a ball for the dog and shout, "Fetch!" and the ball would ricochet all around the space pod, flying horizontal and vertical and thumping off the walls. And the dog would bang all over the place like a crazy pinball, like he's lost his nut, trying to catch this non-stop bouncing ball. And he might even get beamed in the head a couple times, but you know what dogs are like. He wouldn't mind. He'd just keep dashing around with his ears flapping all over the place, and his legs moving 3 different ways, and he'd be barking and shrieking and getting so excited that he wouldn't be able to stop himself and might actually, now that I think about it, have a heart attack. And it's then that she says, "I don't think balls move that fast in space." When I ask her what she means, she just says, like she knows for sure, "Stuff seems to move slower in space, like stuff floats." I often wonder how they got the dog onto the space pod in the first place. Like, did they leave a trail of kibble leading up a ramp? Did they just yank on his leash and holler at him like the old woman with the Dalmatian who walks past my house every night? Or did they bend down and say, "Here, boy, here, doggy"? Did they do it in that excited whisper that dog owners use, like what they're about to do is the most unthinkably exciting thing a dog could possibly do? And she says, "I'm not really sure what we're talking about." I admire her for admitting this. Through the spotty window pane, the afternoon filters in and folds her into its haze. She's eating pad thai and there's a sliver of peanut at the corner of her mouth. I reach out to brush it off and she winces away and looks at me like I've done something unacceptable. She has blue eyes that always have this wet look, and sometimes I wonder if she's about to cry, but then she doesn't. In fact, sometimes she laughs or smiles or talks instead. And I know she was nowhere near crying, but that's just how her eyes look. What I'm talking about is the Soviets and their dogs. There are no Soviets anymore, she says, like I didn't know that. I know there are no Soviets anymore, but there used to be. There used to be Soviets who were very, very focused on getting themselves into space. And these Soviets, what they did was they trained their dogs to man these little Fido-sized space shuttles. That's totally untrue, she said. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Only it is true. Fido-sized space shuttles, like with dogs sitting inside saying, "Houston, we've got a problem, please." Well, if dogs could talk, which you seem to think is possible, I guess they'd be saying it in Russian. Well, why would they send a dog up if they could just send a human? You know how many humans want to go into space? It's crazy. You're right, it is crazy how many humans want to go into space. The thing is, when they used these dogs, they didn't know if space is safe for humans. Like if something awful would happen to a person's body, so they sent dogs up first to see what happened. And what happened? Well, nothing. That's why we go into space now, but the dog's head could have decompressed or something, and he could have come back like a shriveled up prune dog. But you said they didn't bring the dogs back. You're right, they sometimes didn't bring the dogs back. They tried to, but sometimes they got lost. They just stayed out there? Yeah. They just floated in space forever? Yeah. How'd they get these dogs in the first place? Mostly they were strays. I can see this makes her sad. Of course it makes her sad. It made me want to punch myself when I first heard it. I've often wondered how the dogs ate, like if they had one of those ready-feed things that people fill up when they spend the night away, where a portion of food sits in a bowl at the bottom of a big funnel, and the food keeps coming and coming until it runs out. But I know dogs, and I know that a dog would just eat and eat and eat until he was sick or his stomach exploded. Even if he didn't get sick or destroy his stomach, I'm pretty sure the dog would finish the food off in a day or two. And then he'd look up with that dog look on his face and wonder who's going to fill his empty bowl. Only no one would be there to fill his empty bowl. He'd probably pant a little and wag his tail. But even then, no one would come. There had to have been some high-tech way to get that dog fed. She's watching me as I think this. "What are you thinking?" she says. I don't want to tell her because I know if I get her thinking about the food bowl lying empty and the dog wagging his tail and waiting for more, she'll stop eating her pad thai and she will look even sadder. And then I will want to touch her face and she won't let me, and the whole thing will result in us both being a little sadder than we were before I thought of the dog food bowl. Tell me what you were thinking." I was thinking about the dog food and how there would be no one to refill it. "The pad thai won't be eaten." She pushes her plate aside, just and probably doesn't know she's done it. She gazes out the window, and I wonder what she can see through the half-closed blinds. Outside is nothing but lonely parking meters and grass growing from the cracks in the sidewalk. I think about asking her if I could have the rest of her food, but I fear this will make me look like a bad person. I fear it may make me look callous, like I don't care about the dogs in space and their food and daily walks, when really I do. I spent a lot of time doing that last week, but now I've done the caring and I'm free just to think about it. I say, "I bet they had stuff set up for those dogs, you know." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you know, I bet they had like a treadmill so the dog could get his exercise and an advanced space-age feeding system." "Yeah?" She's looking up at me now. "And an automatic dog wash to give him a bath once a week, like on the Jetsons?" "Sure." "You know, the thing about the ball and how it would have been floating around, I bet their food did that too. I bet they had their kibble floating through the space pod and all they had to do was chomp it." "Yeah, all they'd have to do was jump a little or doggy paddle through the air to get a piece. Imagine that, floating kibble everywhere. And balls in the air too. And his ears, if he had long ears, if he were a beagle, his ears would sort of gently rise above his head like wings. And if he shook out his water when he took a bath, that would stay in the air too, in droplets. It would float, just float around him like crystals. And if the dog got thirsty, he could drink the floating drops." She shakes her head, looks worried again. No, they'd need a real water supply." "They would. Of course they would. But it couldn't just be in a bowl because it would float away. It would have to be pressurized," I answer. "It would have to be in a hose." "Of course, a hose." The me in my mind gives herself a high five. "It sounds to me like dog heaven," I say. "Dog heaven with perpetual fetch and drinking from hoses and no humans to say, 'Hey, watch it,' when you shake the water out of your coat, and floating kibble. I hear music in the space pod, the Blue Danube waltz." They saw some things, those dogs. They must have seen some things that humans couldn't imagine. "Dog heaven," she says. "But if they didn't come back, is it heaven if there's no escape?" I wondered why she had to think a thing like that when everything seemed to be going so well. "If you're in paradise," I say, "it doesn't matter if you get to go home or not. If you were in Hawaii right now, would you want to come back?" She shrugs. "I might miss people." I hope like hell she's thinking of Hawaii now and coconuts and not what I'm thinking about, which is dogs getting lonely and hungry, and the one day when the dog finally decides that no one, after all, is coming for him, and that he'll just have to sit, because even chasing the floating ball has gotten old, and that one day the sitting will end too, and the dog will become a silent thing, as weightless and soundless as the space outside his window. "They didn't always lose the dogs, did they?" she asks. Her shoulders are bare and have small nibs on them, and freckles. They gleam beneath the ceiling lamps. "No," I answer. "And you know, I think they probably didn't lose any dogs. I think that might be an urban myth, like the woman who sneezed her eyeball out. And the boy who killed him with Pop Rocks and Coke. And the girl who accidentally internet dated her own father. And the kid who divorced his parents. That one's real." "What do you mean?" "That one really happened. A boy went to court to legally divorce his parents." "Did he win?" "He did." Her eyes get watery and I think she might cry, but instead she picks up her fork, and I remember that sometimes that's just what her eyes are like. Thank you.